The rain stung Ethan Caldwell's face like 1,000 tiny needles. But he didn't flinch. He stood alone on the edge of Willow Creek High's football field. The roar of the crowd a distant hum. His quarterback jersey clinging to his skin. Tonight was the state championship, and he was about to lose everything or win it all. At 17, Ethan was the golden boy of Willow Creek, a small Oregon town where Friday night football was religion. His arm could thread a pass through a needle's eye, and his name was etched on every trophy in the school's glass case. But 3 weeks ago, he'd made a choice that turned his world to ash. He came out as gay. The whispers started soft, then grew vicious. His teammates, his brothers, turned their backs. Coach Hargrove, a man he'd once called a second father, benched him without a word. Tonight was his last chance to prove them wrong, not just to win, but to show he was still Ethan, not the label they'd pinned on him. The locker room smelled of sweat and betrayal. Ethan tightened his cleats, ignoring the sideways glances from his teammates. Jake, the running back who'd once high-fived him after every touchdown, muttered something under his breath. The word faggot slithered through the air, sharp and deliberate. Ethan's jaw clenched, but he kept his eyes on the floor. He'd learned silence was safer than fighting back. Yo, Caldwell, Jake sneered, loud enough for the room to hear. You sure you're in the right locker room? Snickers rippled through the team. Ethan's hands balled into fists. But before he could respond, a voice cut through the haze. Shut it, Jake. It was Miles, the wiry sophomore wide receiver, barely 16, with a mop of curly hair and a defiance that didn't match his small frame. Miles had been Ethan's shadow since freshman year, the kid who'd carry his water bottle just to hear stories of epic games. Now, he stood between Ethan and Jake, his eyes blazing. He's our QB. You got a problem? Take it up with me. The room went quiet. Jake scoffed, but backed off, muttering as he grabbed his helmet. Ethan shot Miles a glance, gratitude mixed with worry. Miles didn't need to be dragged into this. Out on the field, the rain was relentless, turning the turf to mud. Ethan's best friend, Sarah, stood by the sidelines, her ponytail dripping as she held up a handmade sign, "We believe in you." Ethan. At 17, Sarah was the team's unofficial cheerleader, a firecracker who'd known Ethan since they were kids stealing cookies from her mom's bakery. She'd been the first person he told about being gay, and she hadn't blinked, just hugged him and said, "You're still my favorite idiot." The whistle blew. Willow Creek was down 14-7 against the Lincoln Hawks, a team built like tanks. Ethan took the snap, his heart pounding. His offensive line, half of whom wouldn't look him in the eye, held weak. A lineman missed a block, and Ethan was sacked. Hard. The crowd groaned. He heard Jake's voice from the huddle. "Told you he's soft now." Ethan pushed himself up. Mud smeared across his face. He wasn't soft. He'd spent years proving every hit he took, every game he won. But now, doubt crept in. What if they were right? What if coming out had broken something in him? Miles jogged over, offering a hand. "You got this." He said, voice steady. "Screw them. Throw it to me." Ethan nodded, his resolve hardening. He called a play, his voice cutting through the rain. The ball snapped, and he faked a handoff, scanning for Miles. There a flash of jersey cutting through the defense. Ethan threw. A perfect spiral. And Miles caught it, sprinting for a 20-yard gain. The crowd erupted. For a moment, Ethan felt alive again. But the game was far from over, and the weight of his team's rejection pressed harder than any tackle. He glanced at Sarah, her sign now soggy but still raised. He couldn't let her down. He couldn't let himself down. As the first quarter ended, Ethan knew this game was more than a championship. It was his fight to be seen not as a label, but as the kid who'd carried Willow Creek to glory. The rain kept falling, but Ethan stood taller. He wasn't done yet. The scoreboard glared, 21-10. Lincoln Hawks leading at halftime. Ethan sat on the bench, his helmet in his hands, the rain pooling around his cleats. He could feel the eyes of the crowd, the town that had once chanted his name now whispering judgments. Coach Hargrove's halftime speech was a blur of tactics and shouts, but Ethan caught the edge in his voice when he said, "Caldwell, you're still in. Don't make me regret it." The words stung, but Ethan nodded. He'd play through the pain, physical and otherwise. Sarah slipped through the crowd to the bench, ignoring the assistant coach's glare. "They're idiots," she whispered, handing Ethan a towel. "You're better than all of them combined." Her hazel eyes burned with conviction, and for a second, Ethan believed her. But the weight of the team's cold shoulders was heavier than the rain. Miles hovered nearby, pretending to adjust his wrist tape. "They're just scared," he said quietly. "Scared you're still better than them." Ethan managed a half smile. Miles was too young to be this wise, too small to be this brave. The third quarter began with a fumble. Jake, who'd been glaring at Ethan all game, dropped the handoff. The Hawks recovered, scoring another touchdown. The crowd's boos felt personal, slicing into Ethan's chest. Jake jogged back, his face red. "Nice call, QB." He spat. Ethan swallowed his retort. He couldn't afford to lose focus. He called a new play, a risky deep pass. The huddle was tense, his teammates' eyes avoiding his. "Miles, go long," Ethan said. Miles nodded, his trust unwavering. The snap came, and Ethan dropped back, the pocket collapsing around him. He saw Miles break free, a speck of hope in the chaos. The ball left his hand, soaring through the rain. Miles leaped, snagging it from the air, and sprinted to the 10-yard line before being tackled. The crowd roared, a flicker of their old pride resurfacing. Sarah was screaming from the sidelines, her voice cutting through the noise. Ethan caught her eye, and she gave him a thumbs up. For the first time that night, he felt a spark of the old fire, the one that had made him Willow Creek's hero. But the spark dimmed when Jake shoved past him in the huddle. "Don't think one play makes you legit again," he muttered. Ethan's patience snapped. "You want to win this, Jake? Then block for me, or we all lose." The team froze, the air thick with tension. Jake's jaw twitched, but he nodded curtly. The next drive was brutal. Ethan took hit after hit, his line barely holding. Each sack felt like a message, "You don't belong." But he kept getting up, his body screaming, his heart louder. Miles caught another pass, bringing them to the goal line. Ethan called a quarterback sneak, diving over the line for a touchdown. The score tightened, 21-17. The crowd was on its feet, but Ethan felt the divide. Some cheered for the team, others for him. He glanced at the stands, where his parents sat, their faces unreadable. They hadn't spoken much since he came out, their silence a wound he couldn't name. As the third quarter ended, Ethan felt the game shifting. His team was still fractured, but the scoreboard didn't lie, they were in this. He looked at Miles, who was panting but grinning, and Sarah, who was waving her soggy sign like a battle flag. He wasn't alone. Not yet. But the final quarter loomed, and Ethan knew the Hawks weren't the only ones he was fighting. He was battling a town, a team, and the fear that he'd never be enough. He gripped the football, its leather rough against his palm. One more quarter. One more chance. The fourth quarter clock ticked like a heartbeat, each second heavier than the last. Willow Creek trailed 28-20 with 8 minutes left. Ethan's body ached, his ribs bruised from a late hit. But his mind was sharp. The Hawks' defense was a wall, their linemen towering like giants. Ethan called a screen pass, hoping to catch them off guard. The snap came, and he faked a throw, tossing the ball to the running back. Jake, for once, blocked perfectly, giving the play room to breathe. They gained 15 yards. Ethan exhaled, surprised by Jake's effort. Maybe there was a crack in the wall between them. But the next play crumbled. A miscommunication in the huddle left a lineman out of position, and Ethan was sacked again, the air driven from his lungs. He lay in the mud, the crowd's roar fading to a dull hum. For a moment, he saw himself walking away quitting, leaving Willow Creek behind. Then Miles' hand appeared, pulling him up. "We're not done, he said, his voice fierce. Ethan nodded, shaking off the doubt. He glanced at Sarah, who was jumping up and down, her voice hoarse from cheering. Her belief was a lifeline. He called a bold play a flea flicker. The team grumbled, but Ethan's voice was steel. "We execute, or we lose. Your choice." The ball snapped, and Ethan handed off to Jake, who pitched it back. The Hawks bit on the fake, and Ethan launched a pass to Miles, who was streaking down the sideline. The ball hit his hands, and he dove into the end zone. Touchdown. The score was 28-26 after a failed two-point conversion. The crowd was electric, their cheers a mix of hope and disbelief. Ethan's chest heaved as he jogged to the sideline. Coach Hargrove gave him a curt nod progress. Maybe. But Jake's silence was louder. Ethan wanted to believe the block earlier meant something, but Jake's eyes were still cold. With 3 minutes left, the Hawks scored a field goal, pushing the lead to 31-26. Ethan's heart sank. They needed a touchdown, and time was bleeding away. The next drive started strong, with Miles catching a short pass for a first down. But then Jake fumbled again, and the Hawks recovered. The crowd groaned, and Ethan felt the weight of 1,000 eyes. Sarah ran to the fence, shouting, "You're not done, Ethan. You've got this." Her voice was a spark in the dark. Ethan called the team into a huddle, his voice steady despite the chaos. "We get the ball back. We score. That's it." The defense, led by a quiet lineman named Carter who'd never joined the taunts, held the Hawks to a punt. Ethan took the field with 1:30 left. No timeouts. The rain had stopped, but the field was a swamp. He called a play, his eyes locking with Miles. "You're my guy?" he said. Miles grinned, fearless. Ethan dropped back, the pocket holding for once. He saw Miles break free, but a linebacker was closing in. He threw, the ball arcing through the night. Miles caught it at the 30, spun past a defender, and was tackled at the 15. The clock showed 0:45. Ethan's pulse raced. This was a moment that would define him. He looked at his team, their faces a mix of doubt and desperation. He thought of his parents, silent in the stands. He thought of Sarah, believing when no one else did. And he thought of himself, the kid who just wanted to play. "Win it," he said to the huddle. "For us." The clock showed 0:38, and Ethan's breath was a cloud in the chilly air. Willow Creek was at the Hawks' 15-yard line, trailing 31-26. The stadium lights buzzed, casting long shadows across the muddy field. Ethan called a play, a slant route to Miles. The snap was clean, and he dropped back, his eyes scanning the defense. The pocket held, but a linebacker blitzed from the blind side. Ethan ducked, spinning out of the tackle, and fired the ball. Miles caught it at the 5, but a defender dragged him down. The clock ticked, 0:22. The crowd was a sea of noise. Some cheering, some jeering. Ethan felt the weight of their judgment, but he pushed it aside. He glanced at Sarah, her sign now a crumpled mess, but still raised. He thought of her words, "You're still my favorite idiot." He couldn't let her down. In the huddle, Jake's eyes met his for the first time all night. "Run it," Jake said, voice low. "I'll block." Ethan blinked, unsure if he'd heard right. But there was no time to question it. He called a quarterback draw, a gamble that relied on Jake's block. The ball snapped, and Ethan tucked it, charging forward. Jake threw himself into alignment, clearing a path. Ethan saw daylight and sprinted, his legs burning. A safety lunged, but Ethan dove, the ball crossing the goal line. Touchdown. The scoreboard flipped, 32-31 after the extra point. The crowd exploded, a tidal wave of sound. Ethan staggered to his feet, his teammates mobbing him. Even Jake clapped his shoulder, a gesture so small it was seismic. Miles was screaming, his curly hair bouncing as he jumped. Sarah was at the fence, tears mixing with the rain on her face, her sign abandoned on the ground. But the game wasn't over. 10 seconds remained, and the Hawks had one last drive. Ethan watched from the sideline, his heart in his throat. The Hawks quarterback launched a desperate pass, but Carter, the quiet lineman, batted it down. The clock hit 0. Willow Creek had won. The field became chaos, fans rushing the turf, teammates shouting. Ethan stood still, the weight of the night sinking in. He'd done it. Not just won, but survived. He looked for his parents in the stands, but they were gone. The ache in his chest sharpened, but Sarah's arms around him dulled it. "You're a freaking legend," she whispered. Miles joined them, his grin infectious. "Told you. You're unstoppable." Ethan laughed, a sound he hadn't heard from himself in weeks. But as the celebration swirled, he felt a quiet pull. This wasn't the end. The town, his team, his family, they weren't all with him yet. Coach Hargrove approached, his face unreadable. "Good game, Caldwell," he said, then paused. "We need to talk. Tomorrow." Ethan nodded, unsure what it meant. Was it a truce? An apology? Or another rejection? As the crowd thinned, Ethan lingered on the field, the stadium lights flickering off one by one. He thought of the kid he'd been before all this, the one who threw perfect spirals and dreamed of the NFL. That kid was still in there, but he was different now. Stronger. Sarah and Miles stood beside him, their presence a silent promise. Whatever came next, he wouldn't face it alone. The night was cold, but Ethan felt a warmth he hadn't in weeks. He'd silenced the haters, at least for now. But the real fight was just beginning. The morning after the game, Willow Creek buzzed with talk of Ethan's touchdown. The local diner's radio replayed highlights, and kids at school mimicked his dive into the end zone. But Ethan felt no victory. He sat in his room, staring at the empty chair where his dad used to watch film with him. His phone buzzed. "Sarah, meet me at the bakery. Miles is here. We're celebrating." Ethan hesitated. Celebration felt hollow when his parents hadn't even stayed to see him win. But Sarah's voice in his head, "Yuri, still my favorite idiot," pulled him out the door. The bakery smelled of cinnamon and coffee, a warm contrast to the gray Oregon sky. Sarah was behind the counter, her apron dusted with flour, while Miles sat at a corner table, scrolling through his phone. "They're calling you a hero on X," Miles said, holding up a post with Ethan's name trending. "Look at this. Willow Creek QB shuts up haters with epic win." Ethan forced a smile. Doesn't change much. He slid into the booth, his body still sore from the game. Sarah set a plate of fresh cookies between them. "It changes everything," she said. "You showed them who you are." But who was he? the quarterback who'd won the championship. The gay kid the town whispered about. Both felt true, and neither felt enough. He thought of Jake's block, Carter's defense, even Coach's nod. Were they softening? Or was it just the high of victory? The bell above the door chimed, and Coach Hargrove walked in. Ethan tensed. The man's weathered face was stern, but his eyes lacked the coldness of weeks past. Caldwell, he said, sitting across from them. We need to talk about last night. Sarah and Miles exchanged glances, ready to jump in, but Ethan raised a hand. I'm listening. Coach leaned forward, his voice low. I was wrong to bench you. Not because you won, but because I let my own discomfort get in the way. You're our QB. You earned that. The words were gruff, but they hit Ethan like a tidal wave. He nodded, unable to speak. After Coach left, Sarah squeezed Ethan's hand. See, you're breaking through. Miles grinned, stealing a cookie. Told you. Unstoppable. But the breakthrough felt fragile. At school, the whispers hadn't stopped. Some kids high-fived him. Others avoided his gaze. Jake passed him in the hall, silent but without the usual sneer. Progress. Maybe. That night, Ethan found his dad in the garage, tinkering with an old radio. The silence between them was thick. Dad, Ethan started, his voice cracking. Why didn't you stay last night? His dad's hand stilled. I didn't know how to handle this. Ethan, your mom either. We're trying. The words were clumsy, but they were a start. Ethan nodded, his throat tight. As he walked back to the house, his phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. Good game. Caldwell. Sorry for being a jerk. Jake. Ethan stared at it, the weight of the night lifting just a little. He wasn't forgiven. Not fully, but he was seen. The week passed, and Ethan felt the town shifting. Not everyone, but enough. He wasn't just the gay kid anymore. He was the quarterback who'd fought and won. And that was enough for now. Ethan's senior year rolled on, the championship glow fading into routine. Practices were less tense, but the locker room still held pockets of silence when he walked in. Jake's apology hadn't erased the past, but it was a crack in the armor. Ethan caught him nodding during drills, even tossing him a water bottle once. Small gestures, big meanings. Sarah and Miles were his anchors. They met every Saturday at the bakery, plotting ways to keep Ethan's spirit high. Sarah had started a campaign, Willow Creek proud, posting photos of the team's wins on X, always with Ethan front and center. You're not just a quarterback, she told him one rainy afternoon. You're a symbol. Ethan wasn't sure he wanted to be a symbol. He just wanted to play, to feel the ball in his hands, the rush of a perfect throw. But the town's eyes were on him, and not all were kind. At a pep rally, a group of parents stood up and left when Ethan was announced as team captain. Their absence burned, but Sarah's cheer from the bleachers was louder. Miles, meanwhile, was becoming a star in his own right. His catches in practice were highlight reel material, and Ethan saw himself in the kid's hunger. One evening, after a grueling practice, Miles lingered by the field. You ever think about quitting? He asked, his voice small. Ethan looked at him, the kid who'd stood up to Jake when no one else would. Every day, he admitted. But then I think about you and Sarah. And the game. It's bigger than the hate. Miles nodded, his eyes bright. The next game was against a rival town. A brutal match under floodlights. Ethan threw 3 touchdowns, 2 to Miles, and the team won 35-21. The crowd chanted his name, but Ethan noticed his parents weren't there. Again, he pushed the hurt down, focusing on Miles' grin and Sarah's wild applause. After the game, Coach called him into the office. "Scouts are coming next week," he said. "They're looking at you. Caldwell, don't screw it up." Ethan's heart leapt. College ball had been his dream since he was 10, but he'd thought coming out had killed it. Now, a spark of hope flickered. At home, Ethan tried to talk to his mom. She was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables, her movements sharp. "Mom, Scouts are coming. I might have a shot." She paused, then nodded. "That's good." "Ethan." No smile. No hug. Just words. He left the room, the silence louder than ever. But the next day, Jake approached him at practice. "Heard about the Scouts," he said. "Awkward. You deserve it." Ethan searched his face for sarcasm, but found none. "Thanks," he said, and for the first time, it felt like they were teammates again. As the Scout game neared, Ethan felt the pressure building. Not just to win, but to prove he was more than a headline. Sarah and Miles were in his corner. The town was watching. And somewhere, deep down, he hoped his parents were too. He wasn't just playing for himself anymore. He was playing for every kid who'd ever felt rejected. The Scout game was a crucible. The stands were packed. College recruiters in crisp polos jotting notes from the bleachers. Ethan's nerves were a live wire. But he hid it, his face a mask of focus. Willow Creek faced the Redmond Raiders, a team known for their savage defense. The first half was a bloodbath. Ethan took 2 hard sacks, his shoulders screaming with each hit. Miles caught a short pass, but the Raiders' secondary was relentless, shutting down every play. At halftime, the score was 14-7, Raiders leading. Ethan sat in the locker room, icing his shoulder, feeling the weight of every stare. Sarah slipped in, ignoring the no girls rule. "You're doing great," she said, her voice fierce. "They're scared of you." Ethan wanted to believe her, but the Scouts' pins hadn't stopped moving. Were they writing him off? Miles sat beside him, quiet. "You're not just our QB," he said finally. "You're why I keep playing." Ethan looked at him, the kid's honesty cutting through his doubt. He nodded, resolve settling in. The second half was a war. Ethan called a trick play a reverse to Miles, who pitched it back to him. He threw a 40-yard bomb to Carter. The quiet lineman turned unlikely hero, who rumbled into the end zone. The crowd roared, and Ethan felt the tide shift. Jake was blocking better than ever, his effort undeniable. After a crucial first down, he clapped Ethan's shoulder. "Keep it up, man." No sneer, no edge. Ethan nodded, a flicker of trust sparking. With 2 minutes left, the score tied at 21. Ethan led a final drive. The Raiders blitzed, but his line held. He saw Miles break free and threw. The ball a perfect arc. Miles caught it at the 10, diving for the touchdown. The stands erupted, Sarah's voice the loudest. The defense held, and Willow Creek won 28-21. The Scouts were on their feet, clapping. Ethan's heart pounded, not just from the win, but from the feeling of being seen. Not as a label, but as a player. After the game, a scout from Oregon State approached. "Impressive, Caldwell. We'll be in touch." Ethan shook his hand, his voice steady despite the storm inside. At home, his parents were waiting. His dad spoke first, his voice rough. "We saw the game. You were incredible." His mom's eyes were wet. "We're proud, Ethan. We're sorry we didn't say it sooner." The words broke something in him, a dam he'd held for weeks. He hugged them, tears mixing with theirs. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Sarah and Miles texted, their group chat exploding with emojis. Ethan laughed, the sound lighter than it had been in months. The town wasn't fixed. The whispers hadn't stopped. But Ethan felt a shift in his team. His family. Himself. He was more than a quarterback. More than a label. He was Ethan. And he was enough. Graduation loomed. And Ethan stood at a crossroads. The Oregon State offered Cammy a partial scholarship. A chance to play college ball. It wasn't the NFL dream he'd had at 10. But it was real. Earned through mud and pain. He signed the letter in the bakery. Sarah and Miles cheering like he'd won the Super Bowl. The town had changed. Slowly. Willow Creek Proud trended on X. With photos of Ethan's games alongside messages of support. Not everyone joined in. Some parents still crossed the street when he passed, but enough did. Jake started eating lunch with him. Their conversations awkward but growing. Carter, the quiet lineman, invited him to a pickup game. A silent olive branch. Coach Hargrove called him into the office one last time. You changed this team. Caldwell, he said. Not just with your arm. With your guts. Ethan nodded. The words settling deep. His parents were trying harder. Family dinners were less silent. Filled with tentative questions about his future. His dad even watched film with him again. Their old ritual reborn. His mom hung a photo of the championship game in the living room. Ethan's dive frozen in time. The final game of the season wasn't a championship. Just a friendly against a neighboring school. Ethan played for the love of it. No scouts. No pressure. Miles caught a touchdown. And Sarah's sign Ethan's our hero was bigger than ever. The crowd chanted his name. And for once, it felt like they meant it. After the game, Ethan stood on the field. The same one where he'd been rejected. Broken. And reborn. He thought of the kid who'd come out. Terrified but resolute. He thought of the team that turned away. Then slowly turned back. He thought of Sarah and Miles. His family. His town. He wasn't naive. The world beyond Willow Creek held new battles, new haters. New doubts. But he'd faced the worst and come out stronger. He'd silenced them. Not with words. But with who he was. As the stadium lights dimmed, Ethan tossed a football into the air, watching it spin against the stars. He wasn't just a quarterback. He wasn't just gay. He was Ethan Caldwell. And he'd keep fighting. Keep loving. Keep playing. Sarah slung an arm around him. Miles on his other side. Ready for what's next? Hero? Sarah asked. Ethan grinned. The future wide open. Yeah, he said. I am. And as they walked off the field, the town behind them, Ethan knew he'd already won the only game that mattered, the one for his own heart.